Good morning, everyone. My name is Judge Sylvia Holmes. Give me a thumbs up so I know that my audio is coming through, that everyone can hear me all right. All right, fantastic. We have two matters this morning. The first one is 24-1584. This is Hanson versus Starbucks and Morgan Becko. Mr. Hanson, you're here representing yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. And
Good
for
morning.
Starbucks and Morgan Becko,
Hello, good morning.
yeah, good morning. All right, Mr. Hanson, tell me what happened. Actually, I'm sorry. Let me go ahead and swear all the parties in because you're going to be offering testimony. Will you please, everyone raise your right hand? You understand that by appearing in court and offering testimony, you're swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury? Do you so swear?
I do.
Yes, I
All right,
do.
fantastic. All right then, Mr. Hanson, tell me what happened. When
On
was it?
the, I'm sorry,
When was it? That would be a good place
oh,
to start. Tell me the date.
July 20th, late afternoon, about 4 o'clock. I did park in the Starbucks parking lot. I was a customer at the Starbucks there. The sign very clearly states that you can't leave the property. If you're that you'll be towed if you leave the property, and I did. I parked my car there. I left. Um, my son noticed ATX parking, had backed up to the vehicle and said, "Dad, I think they're towing your car." I walked over and had a pretty long conversation with the driver about that while he was hooking it up. He actually went into the Starbucks with me. The Starbucks team showed no interest in telling him that I was a customer or having him stop. And while I was talking to them about that, he turned around, ran into the parking lot, jumped in his vehicle, and drove away with mine. And my complaint is that, I've looked at the record enforcement FAQs on the city of Austin and the towing customer bill of rights. I think when I was having the conversation with him, he should have offered me a free drop and let me move the vehicle. Uh, it pretty clearly states that. And if after he completed hooking it up and we walked back out after speaking with the Starbucks manager, he should have offered to drop it for $50, uh, and let me have the vehicle back. And he didn't do either of those.
Did the driver offer to give you an opportunity at all to cure the situation or otherwise have the car be prevented from a final tow?
No, oddly, he did walk into the Starbucks with me to ask if I was a customer, which I thought then he was going to offer some remedy. But when they said that they wouldn't tell him if I'd ordered a drink or not, then he just ran out to the parking lot and left.
He gave you no other opportunities?
No, ma'am.
Did you have a receipt from Starbucks?
I do. I had a credit card voucher, but I didn't bring it today because I, I didn't follow the rule, right? It says pretty clearly on the sign that you can't leave the property, and I admit I did. I thought it wasn't fair. I had been in and out of the Starbucks, and I bought a drink trying to comply, but I didn't really read the towing sign. And they're right. They if I hadn't have been there, they had every right to hook it up and tow it away. I might not like the policy, but that is pretty clearly what it states. So uh, my point was that the driver isn't allowed to do that. If I'm there with him, he has to give me the vehicle back before he has it hooked up. And I don't know how much of it he had hooked up. He had to take lights off it, and he kept raising it after I talked to him. I don't think it was completely hooked up. I think he should have given it to me for free. At the very least, I would argue he had to give it to me for $50, but he didn't offer either of those.
And when you say that you believe he had to give you a free drop or a $50 drop, what are you basing that on?
I'm basing that on the City of Austin Towing Customer Bill of Rights from austintexas.gov. And number three, general information about towing. The City of Austin only regulates non-consent towing fees. 3D, there's no longer a private property on site fee. Example, tow truck is backed up the vehicle but not completely ready for transport, $0. Or E, the private property tow truck is fully prepared for transport and still on site, $50 if your towed vehicle, and then it continues. But
Was this location in the city of Austin?
yes, ma'am.
All right. I'm going to share my screen and tell me if this is the same thing that you're looking at or that you're referring to, Mr. Hanson. This right here, City of Austin, Towing Customer Bill of Rights
Yes, it is.
from austintexas.gov.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and this is definitely out of date because they have the wrong judge here. In fact, the only judge on this list of 5 that is still accurate is Judge Raul Gonzalez. The other 4 have long since retired. All right. City of Austin, yeah, 2006. That's probably when they put this up here. All right, but you're referring to this section here.
Yes, ma'am.
So you think D or E? That it wasn't completely ready and therefore it should have been free, but even if it was ready to go, it was still on site and therefore $50.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. From Starbucks and our defendant, Mr. Becco.
Hello.
Hello. Mr. Hanson, who actually towed your car?
ATX towing.
All right. And Mr. Becco, how did ATX towing, are you familiar? Did you call them for a tow?
I did not. We do not initiate tows. ATX tow is part of our how can I say, they're written into our lease agreement since the store has been open has been part of our store for the past 5 years. We have a lease or an agreement with ATX tow. We're in a really popular part in downtown Austin. There's a golf course next door, and parking is definitely a premium at this location.
Where is
And
this location at?
it is on 1200 Barton Springs Road, right next to Zilker Park, heart of downtown. So we
like Barton Springs and Lamar?
Yes, exactly. Yep. And so we do not initiate tows. ATX towing helps support us when with towing situations when people
Right. So y'all authorized ATX to monitor your parking lot. And if they see something, then they can have the right they can move forward with the tow.
Exactly, and hence the no parking signs if you're not a active customer inside the Starbucks that are posted around the property.
I got all that. All right. Let's hear from the tow company then, right? Because this seems to be, there's no real dispute about what happened or that he left the premises and that was otherwise non-compliant. His position is that it wasn't yet towed and therefore it should have been free or cheaper.
Correct.
So we have on behalf of ATX Towing.
Yeah, Daniel with ATX Towing.
What's your last name, sir?
Montoya. How you doing, Miss Holmes?
Good afternoon, Mr. Montoya. Good morning, y'all. It's a Friday. I guess I'm eager to hasten to it.
So,
all right, Mr. Montoya, tell me what's going on.
So from my understanding, Mr. Hanson went to Starbucks, him and his son, they got off the car. Mr. Hanson, his son decided to grab their golf clubs, the one across the street.
Yep. They left. They shouldn't have. We got all that. He admits that.
Correct. So then once we got back, Mr. Hanson came running back across the street from the putt-putt place, right? And then started being belligerent with the driver, started telling him that he was inside the Starbucks, he had a computer in there, blah, 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 which none of that was felt to be. So the driver said, okay, so this is your option. We can go ahead. If you can agree to me saying that you're inside, we can give you your car back.
Mr. Montoya?
Yes.
Were you actually there?
No, this is what I heard from the driver.
And that's all hearsay. Where's the driver that actually was there and had the interaction with Mr. Hanson?
I didn't present him because I didn't know he was going to have to appear in court today for that. But I can put him on here.
Get him here because he's going to have the answer for what we're asking, which is if Mr. Hanson, regardless of his attitude, came back at the time the car was still in the lot, why didn't he get an opportunity to take it off?
Okay, hang on one second. Give me a minute.
Give him the Zoom link and have him just come in that way.
I will. Hang on.
All right. He can either use Zoom or he can call in and he'll appear that way. And while y'all are looking for that, I'm gonna go ahead and do a little bit more research myself.
Okay.
Mr. Hanson, let me just ask you one or two questions while we're waiting. So you said you returned to the spot when you realized your car was getting towed and that it was in the process. And when you came back and you spoke to the driver of the tow truck, at that stage, was your car already in the air?
That's what I'm trying to remember. I thought that he had agreed to drop it. Because he said,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to take my equipment off. And I said, I'm sorry. I appreciate you doing that. When Daniel says I was being belligerent, we had a very pleasant
Mr. Hanson,
conversation,
that wasn't.
but he said I have to take my equipment off it. And what I remember him doing is taking the lights off the top and moving it back onto his truck. And then we walked inside the Starbucks.
Okay. So when I asked you, Mr. Hanson,
Right.
do you remember, yes or no,
Yeah.
was your car
I'm
in
sorry.
the air or not? Is it yes, no,
No.
or I don't recall?
I don't recall.
You don't remember. Okay. And
Are you
did
in?
you speak
Sorry.
to the driver out in the parking lot?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did you have a discussion with him about getting your car before it was towed? Did you ask him, say, hey, this is my car. I want to avoid a tow?
Yes, ma'am. In fact, he asked me to enter the car. He said, well, do you have the keys? And I said, no, the keys are in it. It's just locked. And he said, prove that. And so he had me enter the keyless entry on the door and I opened it.
Josh, does that car have a keyless entry?
So the tow truck driver asked you to prove that you were the owner of the vehicle?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious, were you able to open the car up with the keyless entry or with the
Yes,
keypad?
ma'am. I opened the door. I didn't unlock the door. I mean, I physically opened the door,
All
which
right.
again
And
makes me think it maybe wasn't raised, but
it doesn't matter,
I'm not
Mr. Hanson.
certain.
After you opened the door, what happened next?
He asked me to go inside with him to speak with the manager of the Starbucks.
He didn't say to you at that point, okay, here's the drop fee.
No, ma'am. The first I learned about it is the drop fee was researching it on the City of Austin website.
Are you in yet?
So at no point, Mr. Hanson, it's your testimony today, at no point did the tow operator offer you an opportunity to pay a drop fee and retain your car.
No, ma'am.
And you had no idea what that was until you decided to pursue the case.
That's right.
You in? John Jay, you in? Are you in the are you in the Zoom?
No, here, I think he's coming right now. This is Joshua's iPhone. Thank you, Mr. Montoya. We'll give him a second for it has to connect through the audio and the
Thank you.
beauty of the internet. Yeah. Got my coffee. I'm ready to go. Although I'm old fashioned, I just put like a little bit of milk in my coffee. I got a friend who essentially has creamer and then she has a splash of coffee drizzled on top. She gets a milkshake and calls it coffee. They're tasty. I tried the one that y'all had a few years ago that was the rainbow with sprinkles.
Oh, yeah.
Some weird unicorn thing. Everyone on campus was getting them when I worked at UT.
Come on.
That was so popular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, the Starbucks on campus is extremely popular. Mm-hmm.
Oh, are you on?
Mm-hmm. Good morning, sir. Joshua, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Good morning. Joshua, can you hear me? This is Judge Holmes.
He's trying unmute it.
You press *6.
Hit *6. Hold on.
All right, Joshua, can you hear me?
She's asking you through your phone. My phone? Yes. Are you on Zoom through your phone? She can't hear you.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Josh.
Oh, let me hang up. Okay, bye. I was on the phone with them. Maybe once he gets off the phone, it'll reconnect.
Maybe so. Josh, can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh, there we go. Now we're in. Okay, fantastic. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Sorry for Friday fun. Will you do me a favor? Tell me your first and last name.
Um, my first and last name, Josh
He's still
Alvarado.
asleep.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry. Well, that's okay, sir. What's his last name?
Alvarado.
Josh Alvarado.
Good morning, Mr. Alvarado. I recognize that you're waking up. Maybe a cup of coffee going along with the what we're doing here. All right, Mr.
Sorry.
Alvarado, will you please raise your right hand? I need to swear you in as a witness. You understand that by appearing in court and offering testimony, you're swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Mr. Alvarado, were you present on July 20th at a Starbucks near Barton Springs and Lamar to effect a tow?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall Mr. Hansen what type of vehicle was it, Mr. Hansen?
The red Lincoln.
Okay. Mr. Alvarado, do you remember going to the Starbucks there to tow a red Lincoln?
Yes. And if I believe, I thought it was his son's car, from my understanding.
Either way, do you remember that this
Yes.
incident occurred, though? Okay. So
Yes.
really, the question is not one of whether you had the right to tow it. That's been established. Mr. Hansen does not deny that he went to the Starbucks, he got coffee, and then they left the premises in violation of the posted warnings. They realized that his car was about to be towed, so they came back. And he says that then he met with you or spoke to you about the tow, and that even though he told you he was the owner and he opened up the car and he wanted to get it back, you drove away with the car anyway.
Okay. Initially, anytime that I come across somebody, they have an option to pay $50 through the office or cash. But that wasn't the case. I believe that we went inside um, because he stated that he was inside. Um, he had been inside on his laptop, and I guess he was saying that he was trying to get his son they were trying to get his son a rental car, I believe, from the Enterprise. That was the story. He had been inside Starbucks, and we went into Starbucks and we found out that wasn't the case. And uh, I believe he went to, if I'm not mistaken, he went back to wherever his son was, and he didn't come back, and that's when I left, I believe.
Mr. Alvarado, did you make the plaintiff an offer to pay $50 and get his car off the tow?
Yes.
Because Mr. Hansen says that you absolutely did not offer him an opportunity to pay the drop fee.
In the very beginning of our encounter, that's when I stated that I could drop it for $50. And I always at every instant when somebody approaches me, when I have their car hooked up, that's protocol.
And what did Mr. Hansen respond when you told him it was $50?
I mean, he said that he'd been at Starbucks, like that he wasn't going to pay because he'd been at Starbucks.
And when y'all went in and Starbucks said, we can't say that he was here, did you again make him the offer to pay $50 and get his car off the tow?
I believe, if I'm not,
Because I ought to say that it stretches my mind to believe that this gentleman is there and he wouldn't pay $50 to get his car off the lot when he's literally staring at it.
yes, I believe it's, if I'm not mistaken, that's when he left to come, like, and I waited for him to come back, if I'm not mistaken.
It's really important that you know for a fact what you did, because right now I'm more inclined to believe the plaintiff's position that he didn't know he could pay $50 to get his car off the tow. Because I can't imagine, it strikes me as any reasonable person would rather pay $50 right then and there to keep their car as opposed to have to pay for an Uber and the actual tow fee and all of the other things and charges with it. Do y'all keep a record of when you encounter people like that, like offered, plaintiff refused?
No, I gave him the opportunity. I know I gave him the opportunity.
We
Like
don't, you don't write a receipt. We don't give anybody a drop receipt unless
everything.
they pay it out. That's the
Oh,
only
I
time.
know, but did you keep any kind of record that says encountered the driver, offered him a drop fee, he said no?
No, we don't get, that doesn't say, TDLR rules don't say you have to encounter somebody that way. So
I get that.
the only thing you can do is give him an opportunity to pay it. Now, if he decides he wants to walk off and not come back, that's on him. I mean, it doesn't state that we have to sit there 20, 30 minutes, 15 minutes. So the driver has every opportunity to come back to return. Why did the gentleman leave? If he had the key.
Mr. Montoya, I haven't had that established.
Oh,
Mr. Alvarado is just waking up. He says he believes, he thinks. So let's ask Mr. Hanson. Mr. Hanson, did you leave the premises after you had encountered Mr. Alvarado towing your car?
No, ma'am. We were standing next to each other speaking with the Starbucks staff. I realized he left that conversation. I followed him out to the parking lot. I stood next to the car while he drove away. I watched him leave the parking lot, headed north, and turn left to a side street there, and then turned right onto Lamar and drove off. And that's the last I was shocked that he was driving off while I was standing there. I didn't leave his presence after I encountered him the first time.
Yes, you did, sir.
where did he go, Josh? Because I know my
I'm
driver
pretty
would have,
sure
I know they would have never just drove off. They would have never drove off. They're not going to just drive off in the middle of a big parking lot.
because where he came from, I believe, is the golf course.
Where did he
I,
go,
be-
Mr. Alvarado?
I believe that's where he went back. That's where I'm assuming.
You see how believing and assuming is not the same thing as knowing?
Well, so he came from the golf course. So
Absolutely. He
there's-
left. We already cleared that up. It is clear as day. It is 100% a fact that y'all had the right to tow him. The question is, once he was there, he says that you made him prove he was the owner. Is that true?
well, I had him open the vehicle because he didn't have the
Why?
key.
Because I'm looking right now at the Texas Department of Licensing, and you're not allowed to do that. Proof of ownership is never required for someone to save a tow.
Well,
If the car's hooked up and if he wants to drop it, if he had the opportunity to drop it, he didn't want to pay the $50. So yes, in the
I
state of
haven't-
Texas,
I
right?
haven't
But
heard that, Mr. Montoya. Mr. Alvarado says that he made him an offer. Mr. Hanson says he didn't. And
I did make him up.
he told you he offered him the $50 when he was there. Mr. Hanson said well, Mr. Hanson said he ran for outside. He said, "Oh, well, I was standing by the car." Then he says, "Oh, well, I saw him run outside the building." He's already told you twice that he ran outside the building. Why would the driver run outside the building? He would have never left the building. Then he says, "Well, we walked out there together." Well, you just said, and then you walked out there with the Starbucks people. Well, either you walked out there and did your evidence, he gave you the opportunity to move the car, to pay the $50, but you decided you didn't want to pay the $50. You decided you want to walk off and go back to your golf course and leave the driver there alone. So
I don't find that that's been proven, Mr. Montoya. What I say is, Mr. Montoya, you're not helping yourself by talking over me.
No, go ahead.
Right? Because it defies my logic to believe that Mr. Hanson is there speaking to Mr. Alvarado and heard that for $50 he can avoid this and that didn't happen. I can understand that if he said, "No, I was here. I think I shouldn't be towed at all." and they went into the Starbucks. But after that, go in the parking lot, take $50 to get your car down. He says, he says, and there's a little bit of confusion here. Mr. Alvarado believes he left the premises. Mr. Hansen says that never happened. He said, I remained inside. I realized Mr. Alvarado had left. Maybe they got lost and confused inside of the large Starbucks that's busy right there. But Mr. Hansen then says that he saw Mr. Alvarado drive away with his vehicle, and that's undisputed, that he drove away with the car and took it to the tow yard. And then, Mr. Hansen, when did you get your car back?
That evening.
So why didn't he pay the $50 when he had the opportunity to?
He says he didn't get the opportunity. And so that's what I'm saying. If you're telling me I got two completely different narratives. Mr. Hansen says he was never offered. Mr. Alvarado says he was. I find it more believable that he didn't get the offer, because I don't find it believable that Mr. Hansen would have been given that opportunity and then still refused to pay it.
I don't see why he wouldn't have paid it. Josh, why didn't he pay it? What was it? Because his dispute was he was inside the Starbucks. That's why they went back inside Starbucks to dispute the situation. And he tried to say that he wasn't in there, that he was in there as a patron. He was not in there. So when he went and talked to the Starbucks people and they told him, we're not going to vouch for you because you weren't in here. So at the time, he should have walked back to his car, paid the $50, instead of walking back to the golf course, like Josh said, or walking wherever he went. Then he should have been able to drop his car, but he never did that. Ms. Holmes?
I don't find that to be as credible as Mr. Hansen's version of the events. I think it's more likely than not that he didn't get a chance to pay the $50, and as a result, his car was improperly towed.
He didn't want to pay the $50 because he said he didn't understand why he would have to pay if he was inside, and he stuck to what he said before, that he was inside, and he was never inside. And that's when he went back to where his son were, or wherever his party was, and I left.
How do you know he had a son, Mr. Alvarado?
Because he told me that his son was driving, and actually the spotter that had been spotting told me that.
Where's the spotter?
We have a spot.
I know. Is that person available to testify? Could they provide some more information?
Yes, he is. Hold on.
Mr. Hansen, any chance you're getting this wrong?
No, ma'am. I believe I saw the spotter inside the Starbucks. I think he's a uniformed security guard that sits at the table, because I later saw him when I was waiting for my wife to come pick me up at the property. I later saw him hiding behind the Starbucks sign on the corner, and I think that security guard's one and the same. And I think we'll find that is who we're talking about. And if I may add, just the Starbucks staff never said that I hadn't been inside. They said that they're not allowed to verify, which is ridiculous anyway. But
they have to verify with us if you were in there. We asked them.
Ms. Holmes, did you get the pictures?
Yeah, I 100% y'all had the right to tow him, right? That is not a dispute. Tow would have been valid. There's not a problem with that. No one did it. The question is it more likely or not that he was given an opportunity to pay the drop fee? And he says he never heard about it. And if what you're saying is that he was told about it, it strikes me as strange that he wouldn't just pay $50 to get his car off the tow.
He just told you earlier in the conversation. He said was offered.
No, Mr. Hansen has said from the get-go that he was never offered. Mr. Alvarado says that he did. And that's where the dispute is coming in, right? Which version of events is most likely to be correct? And just a reasonable person would say that if you offered me a chance to get my car off for $50, I'd pay it.
A lot of people don't. This last night, we had one that didn't pay. He didn't have the money. So, I mean, he didn't have the money. I can't just drop the car if he's not going to have a drop fee.
If he's impossible of performance, I get, but that's not what I'm heard here, right? What I've heard from Mr. Alvarado is that Mr. Hansen came up and said, hey, that's my car. And Alvarado said, prove it's your car, which he shouldn't have done in the first place, even overlooking that. He says that he proves it's his car. And he goes, well, it's $50. Mr. Alvarado said, I told him it was $50 to get it down. And Mr. Hansen said, I shouldn't have to pay that because I was a customer at the Starbucks. So then they went inside the Starbucks to prove he was a customer. Starbucks would not confirm it. And then Mr. Hansen says that at that point, Mr. Alvarado went outside and drove away with his car. Mr. Alvarado says Mr. Hansen left the scene entirely. And so then I drove the car away. So there's two things that are disputed here. One is whether or not he was ever offered the $50 fee. Mr. Hansen has said unequivocally he was never given that option. Not before, not during, not after, not at any point was it raised. Mr. Alvarado says he was. So that's one thing I have to decide. Which side is more likely? The other one is that Mr. Alvarado says once they went in the store and he couldn't prove he was a customer, Mr. Hansen left the scene entirely. Mr. Hansen said that never happened. And, I don't know. What I know is that there's no conversation that took place after they went into Starbucks. And why is that? Well, there seems to be a dispute. Mr. Hansen says, I didn't get a chance. I turned around, he'd already gone outside and was driving away. I went out and watched him drive my car away. Mr. Alvarado says he just disappeared. He walked back across the street, and therefore I got in the tow truck and left.
Okay, so we're going to go back to where you just said Mr. Hansen walked outside. Mr. Hansen said they both walked outside with the Starbucks staff.
I never heard him say that. Even
he
his
said-
original
he-
testimony, Mr.
He
Montoya,
said he did say that.
the
If we
tow
could play
driver
back-
ran back outside. Tow driver then ran outside and drove away. He described a little more emphatically in his first. I wrote it down.
Right, but then he said we ran out. He ran outside. Why would the driver run
The
outside?
driver
with
ran
the-
outside and drove away.
Why would the driver run outside? And Mr. Hansen said, well, we walked outside with the staff earlier in the middle of our conversation. He said, I walked out there outside with the staff and we walked out there to verify my car. So at the end of the day, they were already out there together. Why didn't Mr. Hansen pay the $50 drop fee?
I think you're answering the question in Mr. Hansen's favor because Mr. Hansen says he never got that opportunity. You're
it's
asking the
Mr.
same
Hansen's
question
word
I am.
against, it's Mr.
right?
Hansen's word against Josh's
All right.
word.
Okay, y'all. We're there. I'm gonna find in plaintiff's favor today. Next time, if you make an offer to drop it and he refuses, make a note of that on something so that you have a historic record that I made him an offer and he refused. Right? Because I just think this is more likely than not, y'all. It strikes me as more likely than not that Mr. Hansen was not given that opportunity because if he had been, he would have paid $50 and gotten his car away. But that didn't happen. So that's
Well, he
it.
didn't want to pay it. He decided he didn't want
Mr.
to pay
Montoya,
it.
you can appeal my decision. All
I'm going to
right.
appeal it. We will appeal it.
Okay. Good luck
All
to
right.
everyone. All parties to that matter are excused. Judgment for the plaintiff. And Mr. Alvarado, I'm sorry for waking you up. Go get some rest again. All right. I know you've got a late night again. Thank you. All right. Again, Mr. Hansen, don't park and leave.
Yes, ma'am.
Right?
I agree.
100%.
Yes, I
Okay.
agree.
All right.
Um,
All parties to that
what-
matter are excused.
What do I do now?
We'll send you a copy of an order. And
Thank
then you
you.
can contact the defendant. All right. Good luck, everyone. Thank y'all very much.